Imagine this. You're alone in the California wilderness. It's February, freezing cold, and you've just suffered a heart attack while trying to free your stuck car. The pain is unbearable. You're miles from help. Then you see them. Headlights cutting through the darkness. Voices. A woman carrying a baby. Men talking. This is your salvation. You scream for help. And everything goes silent. The headlights cut off. The voices stop. It's as if they heard you and chose to ignore you. Hours later, you see flashlights in the distance. You cry out again, desperate, pleading. Again, nothing. The lights disappear. This was Joseph Shones' nightmare on February 24, 1978. But here's what he didn't know. On that same mountain road, just yards away from where he sat dying in his car, 5 men had abandoned their vehicle and walked into the frozen wilderness. 4 of them would be found dead months later. The 5th has never been found. And the strangest part, when Ted Weiher's body was finally discovered, he was inside a forest service trailer with enough food to last all 5 men for over a year. He starved to death anyway. This is the story of the Yuba County Five. A case so bizarre that even seasoned detectives called it the most baffling mystery they'd ever encountered. Before they became a mystery, they were just friends. 5 young men from Yuba County, California. Their families called them the boys, not as an insult, but with affection. They ranged from 24 to 32 years old. And while 4 of them had mild intellectual disabilities, they lived relatively independent lives. There was Jack Madruga, 30, the quiet one who owned the prized 1969 turquoise and white Mercury Montego they'd all ride in. He'd recently worked as a dishwasher, though his family said he was slow in thought and struggled to hold jobs. But Jack was meticulous about his car. He treated it like a child. William Sterling, 29, was Madruga's best friend, deeply religious, known for reading to patients at mental hospitals. A genuinely kind soul. Ted Weiher, 32, the oldest of the group. A gentle giant who lacked what his family called basic common sense. His brother remembered him once spending over $100 on pencils for no reason. But Ted was routine-oriented, always in bed by a certain time, always following the plan. Jackie Huett, 24, was Ted's shadow, inseparable from him. Jackie was slow to react and relied on Ted for help with basic tasks, like dialing phone numbers. His brother would later say that Jackie hated using phones so much that the family would answer calls for him. Then there was Gary Mathias, 25, the most complex member of the group. Unlike the others, Gary didn't have an intellectual disability. Instead, he battled severe schizophrenia, which had gotten him discharged from the army. But by 1978, he was considered a success story, taking his medications, working in his stepfather's gardening business, and living a stable life. He and Jack Madruga were the only 2 with driver's licenses. Together, they played for the Gateway Gators, a Special Olympics basketball team, and they were good. So good that they had a tournament coming up in Sacramento, a tournament that, if they won, would send them to the Special Olympics in Los Angeles, and then Disneyland. They had laid out their uniforms the night of February 24th, ready for the big game the next day. But first, a little trip to watch their favorite team play. February 24th, 1978, Friday night. Jack Madruga picked up the others around 5:40 p.m. They were heading to Chico State University to watch UC Davis play basketball, about a 50-mile drive north. The game ended around 10 p.m. UC Davis won, and the boys were in high spirits. Surveillance footage from Bears Market shows them loading up on treats, a cherry pie, a lemon pie, Snickers bars, Pepsis, and a quart of milk. The clerk, who checked them out, was mildly annoyed. He was trying to close. He would be one of the last people to ever see them alive. Empty wrappers from those snacks would later be found in the car, along with programs from the basketball game they just attended, and a neatly folded road map of California. Now, here's where everything goes wrong. To get home from Chico to Yuba City, you take Highway 99 or Highway 70 South. It's straightforward, an hour drive, tops, but they didn't go south. They went east. Instead of heading home, Jack's Mercury Montego turned onto the Oroville-Quincy Highway, a winding mountain road that leads deep into the Plumas National Forest. They drove this road for miles, past turnoffs, past the last vestiges of civilization, until the pavement ended and they were on a dirt trail covered in snow. The car got stuck in a snowdrift at 4,400 feet elevation. And here's what makes no sense. 5 grown men could have easily pushed the car out. The snow wasn't that deep. They had a quarter tank of gas left. The car was in perfect working order. But they didn't push it out. Instead, sometime after midnight, all 5 of them got out of the car and walked into the darkness. By Saturday morning, panic set in. Ted Weiher's mother woke up and saw his Gateway Gators uniform still laid out on his bed. Ted never missed routines. William Sterling's mother called at 2 a.m. when she realized her son wasn't home. By 8 a.m., Jack Madruga's mother was on the phone with police. All 5 families knew something was catastrophically wrong. The police initially told them to wait. Young men stay out sometimes, they said. But these weren't typical young men. They were creatures of habit who always came home. The families pushed back hard, and by Saturday evening, a missing persons report was filed. On Tuesday, February 28th, a forest ranger spotted something, a turquoise and white Mercury Montego, abandoned on an unpaved road near a place called Rogers Cow Camp, deep in the Plumas National Forest. It was 70 miles in the opposite direction from home, up in the mountains, in the snow. When investigators examined the car, they found it unlocked. One window was rolled down, something Jack's mother said he would never do in cold weather. Inside were the empty snack wrappers, the basketball programs, and that folded map. The car had become stuck in snow. But here's the bizarre part. Tire tracks showed they'd tried spinning the wheels to get unstuck. Yet the snow was only 5 to 6 inches deep. Any 5 healthy men could have pushed it out in minutes, so why didn't they? Search teams scoured the area for days. The terrain was brutal, steep, rocky, covered in snow. They nearly lost searchers multiple times. Then, on Sunday, a massive winter storm dumped 9 inches of additional snow. The search was called off until spring. The families were devastated. For months of waiting. For months of not knowing. For months of their sons being out there, alone in the wilderness. June 4th, 1978. A group of motorcyclists riding trails near Bucks Lake decided to check out an old Forest Service trailer at the Daniel Zink campground. It's a collection of structures, one main trailer with several smaller satellite buildings around it. As they approached, they smelled it. That unmistakable, sickening odor of death. The main trailer had a broken window. They went inside. On a bed, wrapped in 8 bed sheets from head to toe, was a body. When they pulled the sheets back, they found Ted Weiher, but barely recognizable. He'd lost 80 to 100 pounds from his 200-pound frame. His beard had grown long and wild. His feet were horrifically frostbitten, 5 toes completely lost to gangrene, with evidence of blood poisoning creeping up his legs. The autopsy would reveal he'd lived in that trailer for 8 to 13 weeks before dying of starvation and hypothermia. But here's what made investigators' blood run cold. The trailer had everything Ted needed to survive. A propane heater that just needed to be turned on, matches, paperback books, and wooden furniture to burn. Heavy forestry, clothing in a closet that would have kept him warm. Most damning of all, food. In a storage shed outside, there were 31 opened C-ration cans, military-style meals that had been pried open with a P-38 can opener. The kind only someone with Army experience would know how to use. Gary Mathias had been in the Army. But in another locker, right next to where those cans were taken from, sat enough dehydrated food to feed all 5 men for an entire year. It was never opened, never even touched. Ted Weiher starved to death, sitting 20 feet from enough food to keep him alive for months. On the bedside table sat his wallet with cash still inside, his ring engraved with Ted, his gold necklace. And one more thing, a gold watch with a missing crystal that his family said didn't belong to him. And there was one more crucial detail. Gary Mathias's tennis shoes were in the trailer. Ted's leather shoes were gone. The search intensified. The next day, June 6th, about 5 miles south of the trailer and closer to where the car was found, they discovered Jack Madruga's remains. Animals had scattered and consumed much of his body. But his car keys were still in his pocket, the keys to the perfectly functional Mercury they'd abandoned. Nearby, they found William Sterling. Only bones remained. 2 days later, Jackie Huett's father made the most tragic discovery of all, his own son's remains, scattered in the woods about a mile from the trailer. His clothing helped identify him. Jackie's shoes and spine were found in one area, his skull 100 yards away. The working theory emerged. Jack and William, the two found closest to the car, probably didn't make it far. The elements claimed them first. But 3 made it to the trailer: Ted, Jackie, and Gary. At some point, Jackie and Gary left. Maybe they went to find help. Maybe they couldn't bear staying with Ted's worsening condition. Gary walked northeast, possibly trying to reach the town of Meadow Valley, 21 miles away. Jackie stayed closer. Neither made it. But Gary Mathias, his body has never been found. In October 2020, the Yuba County Sheriff's Department issued a letter stating Gary Mathias is believed to be a victim of foul play. The case remains open as a missing person, homicide investigation. 47 years later, we still don't know where he is. So what happened that night? Maybe it was innocent. Gary had a friend in Fabled, a few miles from where the car was found. Perhaps after the game, Gary convinced Jack to make a quick detour. Jack agreed, missed the turnoff in the dark, and kept driving on the winding Oroville-Quincy highway. Too nervous to turn around on the narrow mountain road, they kept looking for alternate routes. Before they knew it, they were miles up a mountain, stuck in snow. Here's what supports this. A snowplow had cleared that very road the day before. Maybe they thought help would return. Maybe they genuinely believed rescue was coming, so they waited. Got cold, decided to walk toward what they thought was the nearest shelter. They were wrong. The trailer was 19 miles away. Remember the man who had the heart attack? Joseph Shones claimed he saw headlights, heard voices, a woman, a baby, men talking. When he called for help, everything went silent. Ted Weiher's sister theorized that maybe the boys witnessed something terrible that night. Maybe they saw a domestic dispute, someone being attacked, and followed the family to help. Maybe someone forced them up that mountain. The problem: no evidence of a woman or baby was ever found. And Shones later admitted he'd been very ill, possibly hallucinating. His story changed slightly each time he told it. This is the darkest theory. Gary had schizophrenia. What if he went off his medication? What if he had a psychotic break and somehow convinced or forced the others to drive up that mountain? But here's the problem with that theory. Gary's stepfather insisted he'd been stable for 2 years. He was taking his medication. He'd had no incidents. And author Tony Wright, who wrote an entire book on this case, points out if they can get in a car, drive to Chico without incident, attend a basketball game without incident, go to a store without incident, how's Gary the problem? Plus, Gary's shoes were in the trailer. Why would he take Ted's heavier leather shoes and leave his own tennis shoes behind unless he was trying to save his own life by going for help? The most likely explanation is the most heartbreaking. A series of tragic mistakes, compounded by their disabilities and the brutal environment. They took a wrong turn, got stuck, panicked, instead of pushing the car out, walked in the wrong direction, found a trailer, but didn't understand how to use the resources. Hypothermia impairs judgment. It makes people do irrational things. Combined with intellectual disabilities, it created a perfect storm of tragedy. Ted, possibly the last survivor, sat in that trailer for weeks, too confused or too disabled by frostbite to open the right locker, to light the heater, to save himself. And Gary. Maybe he did try to get help. Maybe he made it farther than anyone knew. Maybe his body is still out there, somewhere in those endless woods. The case of the Yuba County Five remains one of America's most baffling mysteries. 5 friends went to a basketball game and never came home. Their car was found in perfect condition, abandoned in the mountains 70 miles from where they should have been. 4 bodies were discovered months later, scattered across 20 miles of wilderness. The 5th man vanished without a trace. The questions still haunt us. Why didn't they push the car out of the snow? Why did Ted Weiher die of starvation surrounded by food? What happened to Gary Mathias? Some mysteries don't have answers. Some tragedies don't make sense. But we remember the boys, not as a mystery, but as 5 friends who loved basketball, loved their families, and deserved to come home that night. Their uniforms were laid out and waiting. They never got to play their big game.